Headlights on the highway. If you only knew, being back here always makes me think of you. When the world is sleeping, do you think of me? With the road ahead's coming back again, coming back to me. I remember the long drives, the late nights in your car. I remember it all. Windows down, empty streets, you were all I used to know. You and I, forever ago. And you used to drive me home. Now I drive alone. You and I, forever ago.
Well guys, 6 years ago, I got one of the phone calls that you never want to get, but you know that eventually it's going to happen. I was actually pumping gasoline at the time I got this phone call. The same truck, I was getting gas, heading to my mom's house actually, and my brother had called. When I got back in the truck to check, I checked my phone to see if anyone had called while I was paying for the gas and pumping the gasoline, and I saw that my brother had called. So I called him back, and he told me that my dad had had a stroke and that they had taken him to the hospital. My brother hadn't. It was his neighbor actually that had come to his house and noticed that my dad was out of his head, talking out of his head and everything. So the neighbor put him in the vehicle and took him to the hospital, right? And they had thought up here at this hospital he had a stroke, so they called in LifeStar. That's what they do here when it's complicated or something they can't handle. They will call in LifeStar, and the helicopter, which is LifeStar, will come in and land at the hospital, and they will take the patient to a different hospital, a better hospital. And in this case, he took him to Knoxville, Tennessee, and took him to a stroke unit. Because they was for sure he got a stroke because of the way he was acting. So he was over there at the hospital and in the stroke unit for several days, I think 2 or 3 days before they actually found out what was actually wrong with him. And what was wrong is that he had stage 4 cancer. They ran a whole bunch of different tests and things, and like I said, it took a couple of days for them to figure out what was wrong because they did stuff with his brain to see if he had a stroke. They couldn't find where he had, a massive stroke like that. So they knew it had to be something else, but they was confused about what it was. So they did some more tests, and they figured out he had colon cancer, stage 4 cancer. It had started in the colon, and it had spread all the way through his stomach, into his lungs, into his liver, all over his whole body. And he kept him over there at the hospital for over a week, I think that it was. And then they released him, and we went to a regular cancer doctor after that. I forgot what it's called now, but it's a doctor that specializes in cancer. And that was in Kentucky, actually. So they went there, and stage 4 colon cancer is terminal. The only thing that's going to fix stage 4 cancer, it's already spread through your whole body, is a miracle from God, right? We went to this doctor thinking that he would maybe give something for pain and things like that, because my dad wanted to go for that purpose. But we'd already talked about, taking treatment. And my dad had asked me what should he do because he didn't know what to do and couldn't make the decision. So he left it up to me. And I told him, I said, let's go first and talk to the cancer doctor up here in Kentucky and see what he has to say. Then we'll make a decision, from there. So we went to Somerset, Kentucky, actually where it was at, and went to the cancer specialist there. I forget what that's called now, guys. In the comments below what that's called, a cancer specialist. Anyway, it's all he done is treated cancer patients, right? And we went in, and he took blood, things he wanted to do, right? And we waited in a room for probably 35, 45 minutes at least before the doctor came in. And he came in, it was some foreigner, is what it was actually, and he spoke pretty much broken English, and he was just wanting to go ahead and put stents in his chest to put the radiation therapy in and start chemotherapy that day and stuff. And I told him, I said, we're not sure about doing this or not, because when it's stage 4 cancer, it's terminal, and doing all this, is it going to make him well? he had been diagnosed with what's a death sentence at stage 4 cancer. Like I said, it spread all the way from his colon into his liver, into his lungs, into his kidneys. It was spread all over his whole body. And I knew that it wasn't going to do any good as far as about saving him. And it wouldn't prolong his life either. And I was talking to the doctor about this. You could tell he's getting agitated because he wanted the money. He knew that it wasn't going to cure my dad, wasn't going to extend his life, wasn't going to make his life any better, but he wanted that money for that treatment. And he wasn't even friendly after, I started questioning him about these things. And my dad, he didn't really say nothing, he was just listening, because my dad, he wasn't very educated at all. He actually couldn't read and write, and he was pretty much a lifelong alcoholic. He got into drugs and things, and he had a lot of issues. So he let me make the decision and told me he wasn't capable of making the decision himself, and left it up to me. And it was a hard decision. That's why I said to him, we go talk to the doctor first. But talking to that doctor about treatment and the way he acted, and I could tell that he knew himself that it wasn't going to do any good as far as about helping my dad live longer or to be not, as sick. On the contrary, if he would have taken the radiation and the chemotherapy, he would have been at the doctor several times a week taking that. He'd have been on the road constantly back and forth. He would have been sick. He'd have lost his hair, and he would have still died. So I made the decision to not take it, to not do any treatment, just to take treatment for pain through hospice and do it that way, because I knew that it wasn't going to do any good anyway. It was just to make money for, the doctor. And it was a hard decision, because you want to think deep down that they can actually do something. Maybe you want to have that hope, any little hope that they can fix it, and they can do something to make it better, to make it not as painful, to make you live a little bit longer, maybe with the treatment. But I knew deep down that it was a death sentence. And if he could have taken, the treatment, like I said, he'd have been on the road all the time, back and forth to the hospital, taking treatment. He'd have been sick. He'd have been in a worse mess, in my opinion. So I made the decision that he wasn't going to take any cancer treatments. And like I said, that was a hard decision. And they said that he had maybe 4 to 6 months to live. And he actually lived 8 months. So I would say they meant he had 4 to 6 months to live if he took the treatment. So he lived, actually, I think it was 7 months, just about 8 months after being diagnosed, and after they said that he had, 4 to 6 months to live, he lived 8, or just about 8 months. And he wasn't really sick during that whole time. Didn't really hurt a whole lot during the whole time. Granted, they was giving him medication through hospice, and he was taking something for his stomach, because he would get sick at his stomach and try to throw up. Take that pill, it's pretty much fixed that was. He was taking the fentanyl, the patches of fentanyl pills and things to keep the pain down, but he wasn't in a lot of pain. And like I said, he actually lived longer than he said he was going to live. So looking back, I made, in my opinion, the right decision. And it's a decision I've had to live with. A lot of people can't make decisions like that, those life and death type decisions, because they are difficult, because you're afraid that if you make this decision, it's going to be the wrong decision. You're going to cause someone else, or even yourself, if you make a decision for yourself, to suffer longer, to have a shorter lifespan. But looking back, I don't regret the decision I made to not have him take, treatment. I use that very lightly, treatment, because it was just to make money for the medical industrial complex and that doctor, who got pissed off because I said what I think about it. But getting to the point here, like I said, he lived longer than what they gave him originally to live. He lived a couple months longer, and he wasn't really sick. He got sick the last month of his life, and he had to go to a nursing home because he was so bad and couldn't walk. The nose was itching. Allergens blowing through the window here. But anyway, he was he went to hospice first at Cuban, where he lived at, and then he went to a hospice location for about 3 days. Then he shipped him to the nursing home, and he was at the nursing home for about a month. And man, didn't read like he's in a lot of pain there, actually, either, or sick. He was bedridden, couldn't get up, but he was on so much medicine and stuff, he couldn't really feel anything. He didn't even know where he was at most of the time. In fact, I'd go visit about 3 or 4 times a week. I'd go visit the nursing home and see if he needed anything and things like that. But I went up there that one day, and it was in the middle of the day when everyone was walking back and forth in the hallway across, past his room, and he was in the bed closest to the doorway, and another guy that was the patient was on the other side. There's 2 people in that room. And my dad was there, had a shirt on, but didn't have no pants on whatsoever. Nothing at all. And when I walked in, he was there, had his hand on his genitals, just slinging it around. And everybody walking by the room and stuff, and I said, good Lord, pull that sheet up. And when he put the sheet back on top of him, he was out of his head at the time. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know where he was at. And so I left quick as possible, went to the Dollar General store, which is about a mile from the nursing home there, and picked him up some pull-up pants. And I put those on for him, and to keep him from showing himself to everyone passing by. And you would think that the nurses there would have done something about that, but he was just obscene what he was doing there in front of everybody because he's out of his head. He didn't know where he was at, and you could go see him and he would know who you were because it went to his brain. I could go talk to him, he'd be, he'd know his family and everything. But then as soon as you left, he would forget that you were there. Another time, I remember a nurse asked him how he was doing. And he said, I'm doing good. He said, I'm just trying to get this wedge into this tree. And what he was talking about is he got timber most of his life. And you will notch the tree, and you can put a wedge in and notch on the other side and try to drive that wedge in to get that tree to fall certain ways or cutting also. And he was doing that, he thought. But he's actually in the hospital bed there at the nursing home. So like I said, he didn't know where he was most of the time. Didn't really suffer most of the time until the last hour or two before he passed away. But I made that decision, and it did bother me for a while after making the decision because I was thinking, what if, he could have got treatment and got better. But I know here that was stage 4 cancer that had spread that far, from the colon to the liver to the lungs to everywhere. And even it spread to his brain and everywhere. Stage 4, terminal. So it wasn't going to do any good to get that treatment. And in my opinion, I made the right decision. But the moral of this story and why I'm telling you all this is that when it comes to prepping and life in general, you may have to make some difficult decisions. And those decisions could be whether or not someone lives or dies. You may have to make decisions for yourself, for your family, in life, and in survival situation. You may have to make quick decisions. And you have to be comfortable with those decisions because you can't let a decision like that you made, and if you did make the wrong decision, destroy what life you have left. Because sometimes we make decisions, and they may be the right decision, or they could be the wrong decision. But you have to make that decision regardless. And you have to think about it, use logic, and say what is the best solution or decision in this situation. Think about it, and then make it, and stick with it. And don't let it eat you up on the inside. You make a decision, you stick with that decision, and hopefully it's the right decision, sometimes it's not. And even if it's not the right decision, you made that decision on the information that you had at that time. So you can't make that decision and it turns to be wrong and then just be in a state of depression and despair because you made the right decision. You made the wrong decision. You made the right decision at the time you thought based on the information that you have. So you make the decision, you stick with that decision, and go forward in life and in prepping and things in general. Sometimes it might not be, a life and death decision. It could be a relationship decision. If you're in a relationship and that relationship isn't healthy and you know that it isn't healthy and you're not happy, but you're afraid to make that decision to leave and get that divorce because you think that it might be the wrong decision. You think that someday it might change, it might straighten up, it might do better. Usually they don't, but you have to make the decision and get out of that because if you don't make the decision and you go on and say your husband or boyfriend is abusive and you think he's going to get better, it's not going to be forever. I'm going to stick it out. I love this man. I love this woman or whatever. We're going to stick it out. Usually it's a man beating on a woman most of the time, but sometimes it can be the opposite way. And then later on, the violence gets worse. And he goes into a rage and beats his wife or girlfriend to death. She would have made the decision to have left, then maybe she'd still been alive. So you have to go with your heart, go with what's in your head, go with logic and reason, and make decisions, and stick with those decisions. If they're the right decision, that's great, but if they're the wrong decision, you'll find it out later. But you can't go on in life hating yourself and wondering what if, because usually if you make a decision, you may not know later on in life if you actually made the right decision or not. You may also always question the decision you made. Did I make the right decision? I did that with the decision about my dad. But now, I have accepted it, and I know deep down that I made the right decision because he lived longer than they gave him prediction to actually live. He lived another couple of months. He wasn't really sick during that time. He was sick, but he didn't really feel it because of all the pills he was on and things keep him well, or keep him from having symptoms, I mean. So I made, looking back, I think the right decision because his life was better during the time he was alive, and he would have been dead probably quicker taking the chemotherapy and radiation because that stuff will just poison your body. And he would have been sick the whole time. He would have been in misery the whole time. He'd lost his hair. I've watched people on chemotherapy and radiation that is taking that, and the doctors give them hope and tell them that you take this, you'll live another 10 years more like that. We can cure this thing, knowing full well that they can't. When it's at that stage, there's no cure for it, but listen, as it's a miracle. But they will tell these patients that to get them to come in and keep doing that, and they will still die in the same amount of time that they would have anyway, in my opinion. And they will be worse off during the process because of all the treatment, because of the sickness and things like that. But, if you catch it early, the decision would definitely be different. If they'd have caught it early, and he'd asked me that decision, I said, yeah, let's go do all the treatment and stuff and everything we can do to try to get it fixed. But it wasn't caught early. It was caught at stage 4, when it had already spread over his whole body. So he was terminally ill. And that doctor knew it. But still, yet he wanted to put the whatever's caught in his chest, the valve thing in his chest, do all the chemotherapy treatments and things like that, and radiation. And he would have been so sick. My dad would have been so sick. He'd been in so much misery. He spent all his time in the hospital. But instead, I decided that he wasn't going to take it, and he didn't take it. And he lived longer, and he had a better life during the time he was here. He actually got to enjoy, probably 6 months of his life after being diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he was just sick, like I said, the last couple of months, or the last month mainly, was when he was sick. And then the last day or two is when he got more sickly before he passed away. But looking back, I know I made the right decision. And sometimes you might have to make a decision like that too. It could be about your mother, father, one of your kids, your brother. It could be about yourself. It could be a decision on something not life and death, but it could still be a serious decision. You have to go forward and make that decision, and don't look back. If you look back and doubt your decision, you always have that gut feeling. You always be depressed about it. You always beat yourself up about that decision. So you make the decision based on how you feel in your gut, the information you have at the time, your own logic and your own research. You make that decision, and you go with that decision. Don't look back. Don't be depressed about it. No, you made the best decision you could at the time with the information that you have. It could be now. It could be during an SSTL type of event. But there's hard decisions to be made, and sometimes you have to make those decisions even though you don't want to make those decisions. You have to make it, stick with it, go forward, and don't let it eat you up on the inside thinking you might have made the wrong decision, because more than likely you didn't. If you go by your gut will usually tell you what's the best decision to make. If you combine your gut feeling and your logic in your brain, then most of the times you can make the actual right decision. But anyways, guys, if you found the video helpful, give it a big thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't done that already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video, hopefully.